Hello, this is Dean Takahashi from VentureBeat. I'm here at IBM in their Almaden Research Center with Dharmendra Modha. And we're in the Cognitive Computing Lab here. So tell us what this is.
So Dean, what you're seeing is a dream slowly crystallizing into reality. So over the last few years, we've been on a multi-year, multi-institutional, multidisciplinary research effort that brings together 4 world-class universities, 6 IBM labs and fabs, our partners at government labs, and of course our sponsor DARPA, and we have supercomputers from Department of Energy. We're all trying to bring together neuroscience, supercomputing, and nanotechnology so as to lay the seeds of a new generation of computers, cognitive computers, that are more like how we behave, how we pick up a friend's face in a crowd, or a 2-year-old can pick out triangles in a cluttered workspace. So what we've done is we carried out simulation at the scale of a mammalian brain on some of the world's largest supercomputers. We've gathered some of the most comprehensive sets of data about neuroscience. And now, in this lab today, you'll see a tiny, tiny, tiny cognitive computing core that distills the very essence of what we know about the brain to build a new generation of computers. Today's computers are like left brain machines that are good for sequential, analytical, fast processing, rational thinking. What we're trying to do is we're trying to complement it with right brain computers, cognitive computers that are good for pattern recognition, simultaneous, synthetic, sensory motor loop completion. So we think that we are laying the roadmap for a new class of computers that bypass many limitations of the von Neumann computers, such as the coming end of Moore's law, progressive need for ever increasing clock rates, and the need to program these machines. In contrast, cognitive computers will be learning machines that would form a universal substrate over which a large number of applications can be built. Let me tell you more by introducing you to some very interesting people.
Yeah, we got a nice little lab tour going here. And
so this is my very close colleague, Paul Merola. He was one of the lead designers of the chip that you're about to see. And Paul, what demo are you going to show us?
Sure, so what I'm going to show you here is one example of a sort of application where this prototype chip that Dharmendra just mentioned to you, what we're going to do is try to get it to compute something, and in particular, a visual classification task. So what I'm going to show you is, up on the right is a window in which I can draw sort of a visual input. And for example, I'll start to draw a simple number such as 2. And what's happening here is as I'm drawing, the chip is essentially getting that visual input and is extracting features from it. And those features then go and basically what you can see is sort of a window into the chip of what it thinks I'm drawing, and also a simple classifier which sort of predicts with its confidence of which number.
And right here it's predicted number 2.
Exactly.
That red means what? It's
right. The red is
quite confident that
is right. So exactly. So the red is showing that this is the most confident number that it thinks is there, and then the relative. So it's pretty sure, for example, it's not a 1. And so what's interesting is if you could sort of get a sort of a full picture and you can see it recognizing in real time. So here, I'll begin to draw sort of the beginnings of a 5, and we never trained it on an image like this, except what you can see is as I start completing the 5, you can see that it already knows that there's a top part of the 5, and when I sort of fill it in,
and your predicted number.
It syncs up with it. And so all of this is running on this cognitive computing core that Dharmendra told you about, and actually John can show you.
This is John Arthur, and you've got what here?
So this is the actual chip that was running Paul's demo. It's this little piece of silicon there. It's about 2 millimeters by 3 millimeters. It has 256 integrate and fire neurons, and that means that they summate their input over time, and once they reach a threshold, they emit an event and then reset themselves. And those events communicate between the neurons with synapses. So this chip has 256 neurons and 262,000 synapses, which the neurons use to communicate and compute things like digit recognition.
And that sounds like a lot. I'm sure you guys can actually make something much more sophisticated as far as manufactured a chip goes, right?
Well, that's the goal in the future. This is about the size and complexity of a millimeter-long worm brain.
Cool. And
so John, by the way, I should mention, is also the co-lead designer for the chip that you just saw. And now let me show you something very cool and very different.
Okay.
So what you have here is my very, very close colleague, Bill Risk. Bill is also the technical project manager for the software part of the cognitive computing project. And he'll tell you about his latest creation here.
So, thanks. So this is what we call the brain wall. It's a tiled display system that we use for visualizing the output of simulations of cortical networks that we do on IBM's Blue Gene supercomputers, and also now and in the future a tool for visualizing what the chips are doing and characterizing and debugging them. So
this is showing what's happening on the kind of chip we just saw?
Yeah, so so in the demo that you just saw, you saw a display that was similar to one of these squares. Each of these white boxes represents a single neuron. It might be a neuron that's in a simulation, it might be a neuron that's on an actual chip. And what we're interested in is when that neuron fires, and when it does so, we turn the box that represents it white. And so using a display like this lets us see, as a function of both space and time, which neurons are firing when, and detect patterns in their firing. This box has 256 neurons in it. That's the size of our current chip. What you see on the whole screen here is an array of about 1,000 such cores, which represent a total of about 250,000 neurons. So if the current chip is, as John said, something like a 1 millimeter long worm, biologically what you see on the screen here would be somewhere between a really smart ant and a really dumb bee. Your typical
so you got a ways to go to catch up to a human brain here. You're going to have knock down a few walls, I guess. Or
yeah,
whatever,
we will, or we'll have to use each pixel in the display to represent a group of neurons. This display as a whole has 65 million neurons, so we could use, if we use one pixel to represent one neuron, we could represent something about the size of a rat's brain. The typical monitor you connect up to your computer has maybe 2 million neurons. So putting a bunch of them together like this and making them work like one display gives us effectively a single display that's 65 million neurons big.
So this is all kind of random right now, and it's not really thinking, but if it were thinking, what would you notice about all of the patterns here on the wall?
Well, depending on what the chip or the simulation is configured to do, you might see certain areas firing more than others, and you might see that the activity in one area spreading to other areas as information propagates through the network of the chip.
Cool. Thank you.
Dean,
and we've got,
have you played Pong before?
Yeah.
Well, here's Steve Esser. He's been co-leading our software side of the effort here, and he'll show you what our team has created.
Okay.
So we've actually taught this chip, the same chip that John and Paul showed you earlier, to play the game of Pong. And what's interesting about this is it's actually playing the game completely different than the way a traditional computer opponent would play it. A traditional computer player would have access to the x-y coordinates of this ball, would know the velocity vector of that ball, and would just have some equation that's been programmed in that tells it, given those inputs, the ball's going to end up at some location down here, and the paddle should move to that location. In our case, what we're actually doing is the computer player, the chip, has access to none of that information. Instead, it simply has a visual input of this playing field, and each of these little parts of the playing field is mapped to a particular neuron on the chip. You can actually see these neurons activating one after another as the ball moves through the playing field. And the chips, what's been done is we've actually trained it so that as the ball moves along a particular trajectory, it sees those neurons activate one by one,
And then when the ball gets to the end of the playing field, if the paddle's in the right location, the chip sends a signal to say, that was a good thing. If the paddle isn't in the right location, the algorithm gets a signal that says, that was the wrong thing. And gradually it learns to move the paddle into the right location. After it's been trained in this way, it actually is able to anticipate the particular trajectory the ball is taking, and then it has a set of output motor neuron-like neurons that are able to move the paddle to the particular correct location. As you can see, it's quite good at this game. It's actually very rarely misses in this particular configuration.
So it's this path that it's showing here, that's the prediction basically, that it
So
thinks
the path
where
you're seeing, it's the path that's seen the ball go along so far. You don't actually see the prediction occurring, but you can see the result of that as you can see the paddle starting to move as it begins to figure out where it thinks that ball is going to be.
Cool. Very interesting. So where do you guys go from here, I guess?
Well, there's more to come from where this has come from. So let's stay tuned.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.